think that people have patchy understanding of data on the web. It's such an enormously complex subject. You know, retailers might use data in a completely different way to search engines. You know, I don't think anybody has ever had access to Google's search algorithms and what that means if you are suddenly at the top of the search when you look for something, or if you suddenly fall to the bottom. You know, that's something that's very murky and behind the scenes. But similarly, I think that retailers, by and large, have a pretty good, open, transparent policies. They tell you what they're doing with your data. You read terms and conditions. You know, we always tried to be very transparent with our own business, lastminute.com, like every, you know, proper retailer now. So I think it's enormous varying degrees. I think the big piece that's obviously come from nowhere in the last few years, the hot topic of social media. I think that people are only beginning to understand what it might mean to post things about yourself in a public forum that then might be looked at by people that you work with, or might be looked at by people that might employ you in the future. Or, you know, that whole area, I think, is where people are now only beginning to have a think about what that might mean for them.
And in relation to that, do you think that there is a kind of a shift in terms of our expectations of privacy and the way we handle, you know, I think it felt kind of, it probably still does for some bit unimaginable that you would kind of put a picture of yourself drunk or something at a party, or you wouldn't stick that on the wall outside your house, probably, maybe you would, but lots of people obviously happy to do that on social media sites and so on, and it's an even more public declaration.
I think that social media is interesting. You know, would you stick a picture outside your house? No, probably not. But you are always framed in social media context in a world that you create. You know, you don't have to accept people as your friends. You don't have to let the whole world see it. It's not really anonymous in the way that I think sometimes people get scared that it is. I think this all comes back to education, and it's all very well for me to sit here in my mid to late, can I bear it 30s. Actually, you need to look at what 11, 10, 9, 8-year-olds are doing and how they're interacting with technology. And for me, they're the people that both can teach us, but also need to be educated themselves. And this is where I agree with Tanya Byron's report about technology, that, you know, it's all good and to be embraced, but you have to underpin it with proper education about exactly those issues of identity and privacy.
In that sense, in the way that perhaps teenagers or even younger see the web compared to the way that, you know, people in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s see the web.
There's a massive generational difference in how people see the web, and that's one of the things that I find most interesting and exciting. You know, not only just between classic generational breakdowns, but much more split and atomized fragments of early 20s to late 20s to mid 20s. It's more about kind of the stage of life you're at as well, I think, and where you are in the education cycle. You know, if I look now at how 8, 9, 10-year-olds use the web, it's completely different to how, you know, somebody aged 18 would use it, completely different how I would use it again. And I think that one of the issues around the privacy questions that are now being raised are, have we taught children how to be safe online enough? And are we, you know, aware enough, if we've come at this later with technology, of all the different ways that information is used? So there's definitely a piece of education that needs to underpin all of the developments that are happening in technology.
I think one area that's kind of, I suppose, particularly topical and controversial is relation to behavioural targeting in advertising. Do you have an opinion?
I'm really not so vexed by behavioural advertising and targeting. I think that as long as it's transparent at some level, and you, the consumer or the user, have the ability to find out what is being kind of used to your benefit, your supposed benefit, then I feel quite relaxed about it, and actually think that it can be an exciting leap forward. I think that where it becomes tricky is when it's not totally transparent to you, the user, or there is no way of finding out. And I think that that's one of the areas that perhaps we're only beginning to grapple with now.
When historians look back in 100 years, as presumably they will do, what do you think they would say was the significance of the web?
I think that it's too early to tell what historians in 100 years will say. I mean, I think that one of the things that's challenging, slightly terrifying, and probably will make the historian's life extremely difficult, is the fact that this is a change that is constantly evolving. It's not a moment in time where suddenly a change happened. You know, yes, business models were broken, new businesses were created, people were able to talk to each other and to institutions in a different way. But I'm not sure that historians will be able to, you know, it's the War of the Roses happened and then a whole set of other things happened. The French Revolution happened and a whole set of other things happened. I think the thing about the web is it is a moving feast every single year, every single week. And so it's too early to tell. It's too early to tell.
What do you think is what's the essence of the power of the web? Why did it take off? If you're going to pick on one particular aspect of it.
I think it's nearly impossible to pick on one aspect. I know that it's very helpful for people to have, you know, this one thing is the reason why I was successful, but the only way I could characterize it is that it's just a tool, you know, it's a tool that makes things that we do in our everyday lives so much more rich and easier and convenient and fun. And the essence of it for me is that there isn't a predetermined, you know, way of behaving on the web. It's what you make of it. And that's true for a business, and that's true for an individual. And it's that tool and the power of that tool that you can use as an individual that I think is what makes it so kind of unquantifiable, I guess.
Again, this is probably an unfair question, but I'll ask it anyway. If you look back on 40 years of kind of the internet, 40 years of the early internet, now through to the web, do you think it tells us anything about human nature? And if so, what does it reveal?
Yeah, I like the thought of whether the internet in over 40 years tells us something about human beings. I'm a positive person and an optimistic person, and I think that the web has reinforced what I believe about human nature, was that it's good, and it's, when put together, it can create great things. You know, I find the web a friendly place. I don't like this extremist view that the web is suddenly a danger zone where unpleasant people can more easily find their vulnerable targets. You know, that's the extremities, as it always has been in every society. And as long as you educate to make people safe, I think the bulk of what happens in the web is interesting, exciting, supportive, fun, entertaining, and magic.